Hello and welcome to Inspired to Taste. I'm Liz Joy, and today I'll be showing you how to make this charming, lacy 3D dress cookie.
And I really want to get you guys familiar with creating my signature 3D panel effect. And we're gonna zhuzh it up with this pretty little bow and a nice little beaded necklace. I like to use templates rather than cookie cutters, and I laminate.
You can find a download link for these templates in the description below.
For the Audrey inspired dress, we're going to be working with this ivory tone fondant. We're just gonna knead it till it's nice and supple. So for this, it'll be easier if we go ahead and cut the dress along the waist seam, and that way we're kind of dealing with two smaller pieces. Basic fondant roller. This is basically all I use for fondant work. We're gonna start with the pink rings, which are the smaller ones. And we want this to be very smooth, so we're using a nice firm pressure. When texturing fondant, you can use so many different things. For this one, we're going for a lace effect. So I'm gonna use this Katie Sue mold, which has really, really beautiful layers on it. It's nice to go ahead and cornstarch your surface first so it doesn't stick. And I always lay my fondant on top of the texture mat. This way I have more control over what it's doing. And then I basically give the fondant a bit of a massage. And this way I can make sure it gets into all of the crevices and we get a nice sharp texture. The name of the game when working with fondant is light touch. So I'm gonna start with the bodice. So we're just gonna use a very sharp blade. I also like to kind of start at the center and work my way out, especially if there's angles. So I'll just kind of hold it and move the knife outwards. That way you're not mushing the fondant. And there we have a little lace bodice. It's really easy to attach fondant to your cookie. You can just use paintbrush with a little bit of water, and you do not want to soak your cookie. You just want to see a very, very light sheen. I have accidentally soaked the cookie before. It's sad. And then just kind of lay it on. My cookie spread a bit, so if you want your fondant to be a bit closer to the edge, we're going to do a light tug from the center, and it will expand pretty easily. And voila, first piece done. Next, we are going to do the exact same steps, but we're going to do the base of the skirt. So we need a bit bigger piece of fondant. This bottom piece isn't going to end up showing too much, but you still want to take time and make sure that it's consistent. And we're just going to do the same texture steps over again. To cut pieces like this that are a bit bigger, I love to use a flexible straight edge. That way you're not doing these long cuts, you can just cut almost like a cookie cutter. And this is a very sharp blade for cutting clay, but I absolutely love it because you're not causing any drag on the fondant. And then we'll go back in with the blade and do the detail work. For the skirt portion, what we're aiming to do is create these hollows for a nice delicate bite because we do want someone to eat this eventually. We're gonna work with it a bit more, so I don't wanna attach it yet. So we're just gonna set that there until we do our next pieces. We're gonna use our panel templates. We need one middle one, which is the larger one, and two side panels, which I've textured the same way that we did the base pieces. To do these panels, it's actually pretty simple. I generally lay it over my middle finger and just let it drape. Shape it and pinch as we go up. And you want the pointy end to be pinched fairly tight because we want it to look like a nice, delicate fold. And I also like to grab my cookie and make sure that everything fits appropriately. I did end up with a little crack because my fondant's a bit dry, so I'll show you guys how to disguise that at the end. So this fits pretty well. I'm gonna go ahead and prop it a little bit, just so I have the shape I want. You can also use a paintbrush handle and kind of get in there and just make sure it's exactly the shape that we want. Because once this starts drying, you don't want to handle it too much because you'll end up with more cracks. We want it to get to the perfect shape and then dry. And we're just gonna do the same thing with the side panels. These are so narrow. Again, keep in mind you wanna pinch this end to keep nice clean lines. So for the side panels, I'm gonna shape them in a bit of a curve so that they follow the line of the dress. You can get in there with your paintbrush and make sure it's just curved exactly like you want. We want it to be dried enough that we can handle them because we're going to turn it over and stick them on the dress and we don't want to smush them. So I'm just going to kind of let them sit here and dry in place for a bit. You could technically just go ahead and attach the panels, but again, what I'm looking for is a nice delicate bite, and I love having hollow panels like this sample. So I'm just kind of gauging where they're going to set, and I'm going to cut my underskirt so that we have those hollows. And you want to be pretty conservative with this because we don't want any gaping holes showing. So I'm going kind of inside where the panel will sit. So we'll remove this one. I love using shapes that have natural scallops at the end because that just tells me where I'm going to put my panels and how I'm going to make my fabric billow. And we'll do the same thing on this side. When attaching your panels, you're going to use about an outline consistency royal icing. It pays to take the time to mix a royal icing the same color as your fondant, just in case we see any on the edges or we need to fill in gaps. We don't have to worry about being perfect here. We just want a nice outline on your edge. And another benefit to having the same color, I had this hole earlier that I didn't really want to worry about. I'm just going to patch it with a bit of royal icing. I have a little crack here, so we'll do the same. So don't stress about those little mistakes. There's always ways to neaten them up. And if we lost some shape, you can go in and just fix that, get it to where you're happy. And then we're going to go back with water and dampen the cookie just a little bit. Remember, be conservative with the water. We don't want to soak this cookie at all. And we're going to tuck our side panels in as closely as possible so that we don't see seams. And we're going to be accessorizing this dress, so if you have a little gap between the bodice and the skirt, it's not a big deal right now. And now you guys can see why it pays to have matching royal icing. And then we're going to do the same thing with our side panels. And any royal icing that's kind of out of control, you can just go and press it in, and it's almost like grouting your dress. You can fill in the gaps and make sure that it's really attached well. And congrats, you guys now have the bases for a 3D billowy dress. And now we're going to accessorize. And you guys can go all out on this, but for my purposes, we're going to make a ribbon belt and we're going to add a necklace. One thing I keep in mind when creating fondant cookies is photography, and if someone's moving them around and looking at them, I want to throw shadows and play with light. So the belt I'm going to do a bit thicker, and I'm going to add on my purple bands. And that's just so it has a bit more heft to it and shows up a bit better in pictures. I'm using my straight edge to cut this because it makes it nice and simple. And I just eyeballed this to a width I'm happy with. Gently tap that down so I have a nice clean edge. And you can go in with a pair of tiny scissors and just cut it to size. And I like how that's looking, so I'll just do a little bit of royal icing over that center seam and attach that base piece. Next, we're going to put on a necklace while we let this dry. For our necklace, I'm going to use gold dragées, and something that's helpful is to have a little pair of tweezers. You can use your fingers, but if you're like me and get man hands with delicate pieces, it's nice to have these. I'm going to start with an edge piece, and when adding details like this to fondant, you do want to make sure it's pressed down fairly well so that it doesn't pop off with handling or if you're shipping these. And then to keep this symmetrical, I'm going to work from the edges in. And just clean up my edges. And there we have our little necklace. Next, we're going to go ahead and make a little bow to add to our ribbon sash, and just cut it to roughly a similar width. And for each section of the bow, we're going to cut 2 sections of the same length. And these are going to be our looped sections. We're going to loop and then pinch to give it a bit of a gathered effect. Bows take some practice depending on the size. It helps to get just a textural feel for fondant. So we're gonna attach these together with a tiny bit of water. And I want them to look like they're hanging a bit organically, so I'll do them at an angle. A little more volume, so I'm just gonna tease it up very gently. I'm just gonna let these sit and dry so they're attached together. And then we're gonna re-roll and get the ends of the ribbon. Eyeball it to a similar width. And then these you can make as long as you like. I want it to look a bit crimped, so I'm gonna pinch the edges. And one more roll, and this is for the center of the bow. So we're just gonna cut that long enough so it can kind of drape around our bow. And again, I like it to look pretty natural, so I don't mind if it's got some crimps in it. And I'm just gonna wet this down a teeny tiny bit. We don't want anything swimming in water. We'll wrap this around, and I'm gonna use some fondant specific tools to push it in place. You can use a toothpick or anything you have handy. And I do have a little bit of a water spot on the bow from when I attached them. The way to get rid of them is just to dust with a little bit of cornstarch, and that'll ensure that it dries matte. And now we're gonna attach these. My bow's still a little soft. I don't wanna handle it too much, but I do wanna handle the ends of the ribbon while they're still super pliable. I kind of want an idea of where I'm gonna place the bow and how I'm gonna attach the ends of the ribbon. We want these to start drying in a final position. I think that looks pretty good. We're gonna attach the bow with a bit of royal icing. And again, don't overhandle it, don't press too hard, just light touch and just little dollops of royal icing so that they are nice and secure. Now for the streamer portions, be really careful about handling these so they don't get fingerprints. So when we're attaching the ribbon portion, I just want to secure the very end and the top piece, and then I'm going to kind of sit and play with the shape a little bit. And then just secure that with little dots of icing. It's going to dry firm, so as long as it's attached, you'll be fine. And there we go, guys. You have your first voluminous dress cookie.